We'll go ahead and I know we have people on Zoom also in here, and just want to introduce myself. My name is Bobby Woodard. I serve as the Vice President for Student Affairs here at Auburn University. I want to thank all of you for attending today for this engaging discussion that we're going to have today, but also on Zoom. There are people on Zoom that are here. We will take questions on Zoom, and then the panelists will be able to see them up here when we start having the student Q&A portion of this. We want to make sure that you feel safe on our campus. That is our number one importance, is to make sure that you are safe. And together with communications like this and events like this, we can make sure we're communicating, hearing from our student body, and knowing that together we can make a safer campus for our students here and our community in general. But today we will have a moderator, and I want to introduce our moderator today. And our moderator is Dr. Janai Plattenberg. And I want to read Dr. Plattenberg's bio, and I'm going to read it now. Dr. Plattenberg is an assistant professor in the School of Communication and Journalism here at Auburn University. She earned her bachelor's degree in journalism from Florida A&M and a master's degree in community journalism from the University of Alabama. She later earned a doctorate in media and public affairs from Louisiana State University. She was recently inducted as a Copenhagen Center Fellow. Dr. Plattenberg's research interests primarily fall at the intersection of race and media. More specifically, she studies the Black press, Black identity, media portrayals, and pop culture. Her co-author research has been published in peer-reviewed journals, Black Studies. Additionally, she has presented at her work at conferences of the Association for Education in Journalism and Mass Communication, the American Journalism Historians Association, and the American Association for Public Opinion Research. Prior to embarking on a career in academia, Dr. Plattenberg worked as an award-winning multimedia journalist at both daily and weekly newspapers and television stations in Florida, Texas, Alabama, and Washington, D.C. Currently, she is a freelance journalist for the Washington Post Talent Network. She is also a member of the National Association of Black Journalists. So at this time, I will turn the program over to Dr. Plattenberg.
Hello, everyone, and thank you again for attending tonight's town hall. I want to start by introducing our panelists, and so we'll just go down the row. If you will just give us your name and give us a short bio, and we'll get started from there.
Hi, my name is Clarence Stewart. I'm the Assistant Chief of Police for the Auburn Police Division, AU Precinct. I've been with the City of Auburn for 18 years. However, I was a student here back in 1987, where I was a journalism major, and it took me 34 years to complete my PhD, and I finally graduated this past January. So my wife is a professor here. I have 2 older sons that were students here, and we have 4 more sons that are aspire to be students here as well. My major concerns and my platform is how I lead is basically about family, because I have a large family and I care about my family and I care about you guys as well. You'll hear more from me later on as far as how I approach things and how we approach life and how we approach situations as these later on in this meeting.
Hello, everybody. I'm Susan McAllister. I'm Director of Campus Safety and Compliance, and our office is responsible for compliance with the Clery Act, receiving reports of crime, notifying you about reports of crime, and implementing safety programs for the campus.
Hi, I'm Catherine Weathers. I'm the Senior Deputy Title IX Coordinator at Auburn. And I've been here since September of 2019. One of the things I think that helps me in my position is that I am a mother of a daughter that is 20 and a son that is 24. So I understand, I think, from hearing from them about where students are coming from.
Hello, I'm Dr. Jolene Cooper-Bhatia. I'm a licensed psychologist and the Associate Director at Student Counseling and Psychological Services. I have been at SCPS for the past 13 years, and our role on campus is to provide mental health services to students through individual counseling, group counseling, workshops, and really anything that we can do to support people's mental health and wellness.
Hi, everyone. My name is Bridget Nelson, and I am a graduate assistant in the Office of Health Promotion and Wellness Services with Judith right here. I am a fourth-year student in the Counseling Psychology doctoral program, and my main roles on campus as a GA are to work with Safe Harbor, our survivor advocacy program, and also Green Dot, our violence prevention program.
Hey, my name is Judith White. I'm the coordinator for violence prevention and survivor advocacy here on campus, which, as Bridget mentioned, oversees our Safe Harbor and Green Dot programs.
Hi, I'm Grace Cox. I'm current president of It's On Us, which is part of a national organization for sexual assault awareness and prevention, supplemental training, etc. I'm currently a senior here at Auburn, so as a student, I also definitely understand the issues and the concerns that have brought us here today, and hoping we can get progress made today.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Well, I want to start off by just taking inventory and getting a summary of why we are here tonight. And so I'm just going to ask a series of questions, and whoever has an answer, feel free to just chime in. But can you please explain and summarize the recent events that led to tonight's town hall, including the university's response?
I'll be happy to get started on that one, since campus safety is the department that sent out the notices about these assaults. So I think it's important to talk about how we receive reports and how we analyze those and how we make decisions so that you can understand how we got to this point today. I have to take my glasses off, they're fogging. So campus safety receives reports about crimes from a variety of different sources across campus. This includes the police. We receive reports from them every day for crimes that occurred the day before. They call us immediately if there's some kind of an urgent situation. We receive reports from the Title IX office if those incidents happen on property that's owned or controlled by the university. And then we also receive them from about 1,500 people across campus who are considered campus security authorities. And those are people who have responsibility for activities outside of the classroom, basically. So faculty advisors, Safe Harbor advocates, Title IX coordinators, and housing staff, et cetera, athletics staff. So we receive reports from a lot of different places. And because of that, those reports have a variety of information in them. Sometimes they're very detailed if it's a police report or a report from the Title IX office. Sometimes it's very little detail provided to us. And we have an obligation under the Clery Act, which is a federal law, to evaluate every one of those reports that comes in, determine if it happened on our geography, on our campus, or our property that we own or control. If it happened, if it's one of the Clery crimes, so we have a list of specific crimes that we send notifications out for, and they're major crimes, generally crimes of violence. And then if it poses a serious or ongoing threat to people on campus. And that's a very hard determination to make a lot of times with the limited information that we have. And we err on the side of caution if it's not really a clear-cut situation. So those reports came in. The first two came in through campus security authorities with very little information. We did not have information on the offenders or even the survivors of those crimes, just the nature of what happened, where it happened, and when it happened. And we made an assessment and determined that we should send something out to the campus about those. The third one did come from the police, but it was disclosed during response to an unrelated incident off campus. And based on what was disclosed during that incident, we felt that there was enough information to send that out to the campus. Once we receive those and we make a determination about sending them out, we also do forward them on to other offices on campus if there's any potential campus policy violations. So if it's a Title IX issue, we share that information with the Title IX office. If it's an employee conduct issue, it goes to Human Resources, or if it's a student conduct issue, it goes to the Office of Student Conduct. So that's what brought us here today to have this discussion.
Thank you. And speaking of Title IX, can someone please give us a little bit of background on Title IX, as well as what mechanisms and processes exist to hold individuals and organizations accountable for reported sexual assaults here on campus?
Sure. So I guess that first of all, there's probably an assumption that the students and folks on campus know what Title IX is, and maybe we shouldn't make that assumption. But the Title IX office handles all complaints for sexual harassment, sexual assault, stalking, relationship violence, sexual exploitation, and I think I named all of them. And so when the mechanisms are, when reports come in, and like Susan said, they can come in through campus safety, but they come in through professors, they can come in through RAs, other housing affiliated people. It can come in through an anonymous source, or it can come in from a victim, it can come in from roommates, other students. When those reports come in to our office, we 100% of the time reach out to the victim if they're identified in the report. We get reports without a victim named sometimes because it comes in through an anonymous source, and they just say they could give a name of a perpetrator but not a victim, or a victim and not a perpetrator. But if we get the name of a victim, we reach out to that person 100% of the time with an email from our office that says, provides resources. So it provides Judith's office, which is Safe Harbor, and it talks about student counseling. It also provides our contact information and encourages the person to contact us if they can, if they want to, and then we can talk about options. So I wanted to share with you, since August of 2020, so starting back in fall of 2020 through today, we have received 64 reports of sexual assaults. Now, out of those 64, 27 of them had no named perpetrator. So we don't know who the person is. And 18, in addition to, out of those 64, 18, although we had the name of the perpetrator, they weren't affiliated with the university. They're not a student and they weren't an employee. So total, out of the 64, we had 19 individuals identified who were affiliated with the university and who were accused to have sexually assaulted somebody else on the university. Now, we handle all complaints, so that includes students and employees. So that's not just student complaints, those are combined. We had 2 of those 64 reports had no victims identified. When we talk about, we had 18 people respond to our outreaches. So we reached out to 62 because we didn't know 2 of the victims. We reached out to 62 of the victims, and we had 18 respond to us. And that's, I think, we would like to see that number increase. But we absolutely understand, and that's why we leave it up to the person who's been harmed to decide how they want to handle the situation and move forward. They don't need to necessarily contact us. A lot of folks are working with Safe Harbor when we reach out to them by that time. And we reach out immediately within a day or two. Currently, right now, we have one of those cases, I will say, resulted in an informal agreement between the parties. One went to a hearing, and the person, the accused, was found responsible. And we also have provided a number of academic accommodations, no contact directives. Those are options that individuals who contact us, we can explain that we can do those things, and we do them for them. We have 2 ongoing investigations currently in the office. So I think what I'd like to stress is that we are certainly doing, every time we get a report, we respond to that report. And we also, though, want to leave the direction as to how that situation is resolved up to the person who was harmed.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Catherine, can I ask you to explain the difference, or maybe just explain an alternative resolution, because I've worked with a lot of people who find that really helpful, but maybe don't know what it is. So like
Sure.
in light of explaining Title IX. Okay,
Sure,
thank
so
you.
I think I said informal resolution, we can call it alternative resolution. And you're right, I think that I worked at the university I came from did not have that. And I think it's a great option for folks if that's something they'd like to utilize. So what it allows is it allows the victim to come up with terms and say, these are the things I'd like to see come out of this case, this incident. And those are provided to the person who's the accused. We use the terms complainant and respondent. And then we facilitate that, and they come to an agreement. It's signed, the investigation is closed, and we hold then the respondent accountable to complete those terms. We've had terms where it says the person leaves the university. We've had terms that'll say you can't be in any classes with that person. Or just may say you need, the victim may say this guy needs, or this person needs anger counseling or some form of substance abuse counseling. And the term is included in there, and then they are required then to complete that counseling. So there are any number of options. There are other forms of alternative mediation, which would include, informal resolutions, which could include mediation. And it's really up to the parties to determine, and the person who was harmed to say, this is where I'd like to go with this.
Okay, thank you. So obviously, before your office takes the next step, there has to be a complaint that is actually filed. And so can you talk more about the importance of why a student should actually file a complaint with law enforcement or your office in order for the university to move forward?
Sure, and I can talk about why it's important, why we would like to see that. And then I think Clarence can talk about why it would be important for law enforcement. So for Title IX purposes, if someone files a complaint with us, I think it does help hold people accountable. I guess I would like there to be trust in that process. Going forward through the formal process, which would include a hearing, is a long process. We understand that. It's hard to get around. There are regulations we have to follow. But I think it does hold someone accountable. Even the informal resolutions hold individuals accountable. And if you go through a formal resolution, it's a fair, objective process where the investigation gathers evidence, and then a hearing officer determines whether or not the violation is proven. But it's important because we then have a history of someone, and if it's somebody that needs to be removed from the university, they're removed from the university.
Thank you, Catherine. I think from our perspective, and it kind of goes concurrently with that, that's something I wanted to mention too, is that this process, the informal process, doesn't have to be, it's not an either or type situation. This is something that can be concurrent. And I think that what's important for everyone to understand is that just because Title IX investigates it doesn't mean that we're not going to, or just because we are, or vice versa. There are some situations that Title IX will investigate that we aren't privy to. I think in 2020, I think you said there were maybe about 19 cases or names that they had. We had around 7 cases that we presented to the Lee County District Attorney's Office for sexual assault. But back to the question, I think it's important for people to realize, first of all, we have to understand that when someone has been subjected to this type of situation, that not always immediately, it's not like on TV, they're not always are going to call the police immediately. That doesn't happen all the time. It doesn't. No, we may sit here in this controlled environment and think that's something we're going to do, but it doesn't happen like that all the time. It doesn't. It doesn't. It's usually delayed. The fact of the matter is usually delayed. Why? For several variables, several different reasons, some of which can be guilt. As crazy as that sounds, it may be guilt. The victim blames themselves. The other reasons, someone may not believe them. They're afraid of repercussions. They're afraid of the person that they're going to file a report on. We have to get past that so that they will come and report these incidents. It's important for us to get ahead of this, even if it's for documentation purposes, so that if we're already behind the power curve on this, if it's already delayed a day, we can still have evidence that's essential that we need to prosecute, that we need to process, that we need to collect, even if they don't want to decide that they don't want to prosecute at that time. Because it does happen. But it gives us the ability to go ahead and document the occurrence and collect evidence. Prosecution should be something that's on down the road. It should be a question that's asked later on. The fact of the matter is, these are instances that need to be looked into, and that person has undergone these incidents, they need help. And there's a ton of resources up here. In order to do that, someone up here needs to be notified. Yes, I would love for it to be us. I would love for it to be the police. I would, because it's not an informal process that we go through. It's very formal. And do we have resolutions? Yeah, we do. We do. And most of you here know what those resolutions are. And we'll do our best to our ability to make sure that we corroborate that information and collect that evidence. Thank you.
Hey, I just wanted to add something to that too about the importance of reporting. We can't really understand the magnitude and the nature of the problem if we don't have sufficient reports. And so that's another good reason for people to file a report, is it helps us understand really what the problem is and the extent of it so that we can better address it.
Thank you.
May I add just one thing from a
Sure.
safe harbor perspective? And I completely agree with everything Chief Stewart and Susan are saying. I think that for anybody who's gone through this type of situation, if you could reach out to Safe Harbor, I think we're a great place for you to have time to understand what the options are before you sign up for something that you may not understand. Reporting is great, and it gives police a lot of space, a lot more ability to handle things. But we can also put you in touch with a lot of resources. So I think we can also, I work with Chief Stewart often, just facilitating those conversations to make sure that they land in the way that we all want it to go. So I just want to take the opportunity to say, hey, if you want to come and talk to us, we can help facilitate things and make things like a gentler landing for you so you understand exactly what's going to be happening.
And just to follow on that, I don't know how many times Judith and I have Zoomed with a victim where they're with Judith, and it's just, I have no idea what the case is about. It's solely, what can Title IX do? Can you explain what the process is? What are the options? And I think that's helpful for them to understand that.
So I want to bring the question back to you, Chief Stewart. So can you please explain to our audience the situation with the police department here? Auburn University is in a bit of a unique situation in that we don't have our own campus police department, but instead we contract with the city of Auburn for police services. Can you explain how that works for people who may not be privy to that?
I can. I think Director King wanted to have a few words about that himself, and I'll follow up with him.
Thank you, Chief Stewart. First, I'd like to say that Auburn University is a safe campus. Auburn University, among the priorities for campus safety, is to ensure that this is a safe place for the students, for the faculty, for the staff, and all those that may visit. So in 2004, Auburn University leadership, along with the city of Auburn, elected to form a collaborative partnership to deliver public safety to the campus. As many of you know, the campus is in the heart of downtown Auburn. So in 2004, with this agreement, the city and the university merged resources. So the resources from the Auburn University Police Department and the Auburn Public Safety Division, Auburn Police Division, combined forces. What does that yield? That yields greater resources for police protection for the city and for the university. That improves the police services for the university, for all those that are a part of the university. I would also offer that the university's commitment to that relationship can be seen in a number of ways. In 2018, we moved into a state-of-the-art police facility, a public safety facility on campus. That facility also houses our compliance division, as well as our emergency operations or emergency management division, with police officers that receive specific training for their presence on the campus. Clara is probably one of the highlights of the training. But not only do we train the police officers assigned to the university, we give similar training to those that are that work on the city side for Auburn Police Division, and because they may too be assigned to the university, or they may encounter someone in the city who has a university affiliation.
Just for a second. I'm sorry, do you want to take it?
I don't want to just say something.
Go ahead.
I just want to make sure, it's a force multiplier. With all that being said, it's a force multiplier. Right now, we have over 39 officers that are assigned to the core campus. That's it. Out of 150 officers or more that are here for the city of Auburn, a good third of those officers are assigned to just this core campus area. So along with that, we have 3 investigators that are assigned to this core campus area. However, it's not just those officers that serve Auburn University. That doesn't mean that those officers don't go off campus, and the other officers that are off campus don't come on to help serve the population here. It's a force multiplier. So in essence, the university and the city was very smart in doing this as it increased the number of officers altogether. So we're looking at 150 officers that serve this university as well as the city of Auburn. So with that, with the training and everything, that means all of the training that we have, that we benefit from the training of the university, and also we benefit from the training that we mandate for officers to have as well too. As well as when you think about the majority of students and faculty here at Auburn University, where do they live? Do they live on campus? No, they live off campus. So therefore, I think it's a very good way of managing our police resources, and it works great. It does. It really does.
Yeah, I would just give one more example, and that is if the university alone had their police department, they would not have the resources that are available from an 150-man unit. You know, whether it's detectives or it's a K-9 unit, whether it's an intelligence group that's able to gather information. I would also add that in that state-of-the-art facility that we have on campus is, I'm sure, as many of you know, there's a campus camera network that we monitor that also provides an added level of protection for the student body.
Gotcha. And either one of you could take this, but can you talk more about how APTD works in conjunction with campus safety specifically?
I could start. We're housed in the same building. We work, as Susan had stated before, incidents that we have that are clearly related or related to the university, we notify them of those incidents as well. We also work together in almost all aspects of our duties here on campus, as well as off, because some of those incidents, the things that we do, the occurrences that we have off may have some type of impact on campus. So it's a really good working relationship. It's a synergetic type relationship in which that we both pretty much work together, and I don't think one can really coexist without the other, because we have 2 different functions, basically. I mean, to serve the same purpose, which is safety, but however, it's 2 different functions as well too. We have a law enforcement function as well as the safety too, but more so the safety function and the clear responsibility falls upon campus safety.
Susan, would you like to add anything to that?
I would just mirror what Kelvin and Chief Stewart have said. We have a wonderful working relationship. We communicate with each other on a regular basis. We are down the hall from each other and in each other's offices every day. And I think having our campus be able to call the same group of people for response, whether they're on or off campus, is really huge.
Thank you. So moving on, if a victim or survivor files a police report or formal complaint, what does the police department and university do after the filing? Can you walk us through what happens step by step after that point?
Okay, with us, let's go with a general complaint in general, because all of them are different. First of all, the person would file a report with us. We'd have that person interview that person, obtain all the details that we can from them related to the offense. This just isn't a sexual assault or anything like this. This is most offenses, is that a report would be generated. If it's something, whether or not it is to the level of a sexual assault, that person, a detective would speak with that person, and then it would go from that process. It would be investigated as well. And then we do our normal investigative processes and try to determine if there's any evidence that we can find or we need to collect. After that, immediately though, if it is Clary related or university related, we would notify them immediately as to what's going on. At that point in time, it's when we speak with someone, especially if they are part of the university. We provide them, we let them know about the resources such as Safe Harbor and the right to have someone there with them. Title IX, all these things. Title IX, if I'm not mistaken, I just came out with a very nice handout that we, instead of a huge pamphlet, which can be cumbersome at times, and it's a handout now that we can hand to people, and it has a QR code on it that lists all their services and their rights and everything on there too, which is very convenient. So we make sure they're provided with the resources. They know their resources, and then we go through the investigative process with them and keep them up to date throughout the investigative session. Now, sometimes what happens is that through this time period, and several types of cases, you may have to be re-interviewed. At that time, we'll speak with them again if something else comes up, and give people, sometimes when you first go through an event, you may not recall everything, and that's anything that's really traumatic. So sometimes it's important for them to come back and talk with us again, and we'll revisit the situation with them again as well as try to identify the perpetrators in this and interview them as well. And then it goes on from that process to a case file being developed and then presented to the district attorney's office. Now, all of this doesn't happen overnight. There's one thing that does happen quicker than that, and that is the process as far as what Title IX does. Ours is, again, and I don't want to sit here and make you guys think I don't, and question your intelligence, but it's nothing like it is on television. It takes a while, it does. And during that time period, that's why it is important that we make sure that our survivors and our victims of crime have these resources available for them. That have these resources, they have a support system in place while all these things are ongoing. So I think Catherine can talk more about the Title IX process as well too.
Sure. So the way we would receive a formal complaint, is after we send that outreach, providing the resources and the options, then we get a phone call or an email, and it says, I'd like to Zoom, or I'd like to talk to you. So at that point, I speak with them, or the Title IX coordinator, Kelly Taylor, speaks with the victim, and we explain our process. And if the individual, we explain to them what the differences are. We talk about the informal resolution process and the fact that that's a faster process, but it's not going to normally result in anyone leaving the university. If a victim feels that the incident rises to the level that they want this person gone from the university, there's no guarantee that that's going to happen, but the only, really, the way to do that would be to go through a formal process, which would be an investigation and a hearing. And we have 3 investigators at our office, and we would send out a notice of investigation to the victim and to the complainant and to the respondent, and then they would interview those individuals and then ask for witnesses and any other evidence that the parties would like to provide. And then if they go that route, and again, they could go the informal route, but we explain that up front, and we try to help the victim understand the choices, and then they drive the train ultimately.
Thank you. Okay, let's move this conversation to one of information dissemination to the public. Under what circumstances would a perpetrator or an organization that is involved with, potentially allegedly involved with sexual assault be named?
I'll get started with that one. So, because Campus Safety sends out the campus safety notices about these types of incidents, I can say with pretty good certainty that if there's sufficient information to support that a specific person or organization that's affiliated with Auburn University is responsible for this incident and is an ongoing threat to our campus, then we will address that very quickly and mitigate that threat. And so no notice would be sent in that case because we choose to mitigate the threat instead of sending the notice. The notice goes out if we feel like there is an ongoing threat potentially to our campus. And often that's because we don't know who the perpetrator is or know enough details about the situation to really say that there's not a threat to others. But if we know who that person is and we feel that they're a significant threat, then there are processes in place to mitigate that threat so that there's no longer a need to share that. We also generally are not going to name a perpetrator or organization if it is disclosed and it's a limited information report. We owe due process to everybody involved, and a lot of times we're making a decision to send something out within an hour or so of receiving the initial report of an incident. We are not doing an investigation first. The law does not allow us to do that. We have to assess the information that was provided immediately and make a determination about sending that initial notice. And then if there's enough information, it will be processed through either the police and or the Title IX office to do a further investigation and take action from there. But a lot of times we don't want to jeopardize those processes either because we're receiving this report potentially right after it happened and maybe there's evidence still to be gathered. And also we want to protect the identity of the victim whenever possible. Generally, there is not a lot of value in sharing that information because of the nature of the reports that we receive and the limited amount of information. There's not enough to say that person is specifically a threat that needs to be disclosed.
Thank you. Speaking again of information dissemination, how can students access information related to sexual assaults on campus? And this is a question both for the university and for law enforcement.
So I'll go ahead and start and tell you there are 3 different kinds of disclosures that the university makes with regards to sexual assault from a CLARI perspective. So this is a federal law that requires us to make these disclosures. And we do our campus safety notices, which in the law are called timely warnings. And so we send those out again if it happens on property that we own or control or the public property right around the campus. And it's one of the designated crimes under the CLARI Act, and certain forms of sexual assault are included in that. And then if it is perceived to be a potential ongoing threat, that's when we will send out a timely warning or a campus safety notice. We also post every crime that is reported to our office that occurs in that geography and as well in a wider geography called the patrol jurisdiction. So the city has a university precinct that's housed in our office, which Chief Stewart has talked about. and they actually respond to a larger area, not just our campus. And so all of the crimes that they respond to go on our crime log within 2 business days of that report being taken. So that's a broader picture of the crimes that are happening. That's whether there's a threat or not. It's every kind of crime. It's not just a specific list of crimes. So that gives you a whole picture of the crime that's being reported. And then we publish annual statistics that include rape, fondling, statutory rape and incest, and other Clary crimes as well, and that will be published by October 1st. So that'll be coming out next week with our 2020 crime statistics.
The crime logs is a good place to start that Susan spoke of as far as things that occur on campus. However, every morning we send out media logs to all the media of all the incidents that occur within the city, to include Auburn University, to the media, as well as our arrest reports too. Years ago when I was a student here, it's been a long time. I mean, this building was here then. It was our student act. It was really where we came to work out and everything too. So a lot has changed. A lot has changed. Years ago when I was a student, I considered this whole area Auburn University, and I thought that the only thing that happened were things that happened here on campus. And I think that's something, I was living in a bubble. I really was. I think that the students here now are smarter now because you guys have access to social media and life experiences and everything as well, more so than I was. You're more aware now, and I want to applaud you for that, for being aware, and second of all, for being here, for those that are here right now too, and for those that are online. I really appreciate that. I really do. It shows a lot of support and change. But I think that right now for the past several months, we've been reimagining of how we were going to push out information to the public, not just for Auburn University, but to the public in general, as far as how we handle our media logs and news releases of that, things of such. So we're working on social media platforms and other mechanisms to push information out there that people can readily access it, so that we can be the sole source of it, and we don't have to depend on other areas or other resources to put that information out there for us.
Okay, thank you. So let's talk more about support. So after allegations of sexual assault on college campuses, many students are usually asking questions about what university administrators are going to do to ensure a safe environment thereafter. Can you talk to the students who may not currently feel safe here at Auburn University, who may be experiencing these feelings? And this isn't directed to a specific person, whoever feels equipped to answer that.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and get started. I think some other folks on the panel wanted to talk about this topic as well, but you know, we have a lot of programming in place. Calvin spoke about a lot of the things that we have in place. We've got a security operations center with 24/7 staffing to monitor an extensive security camera network. We've got security staff that are employed by the university, as well as contract security staff that patrol campus at different times of the day and night to add a supplement to the staff that's offered by the Auburn Police Division. We've got our Auburn Safety app, which is a great resource that has a lot of links to information and supporting resources, as well as things like the Friend Walk, which you can use to share your location with someone if you just want that added layer of security when you're going from one place to another. We also have the security shuttle, which runs from 6 p.m. to 7 a.m. 7 days a week while classes are in session. I think most of you are familiar with that. It's very well utilized, but that is door-to-door transportation on campus. There's on-campus transportation 24 hours a day, so it's either through, well, I say 24 hours a day, Monday through Friday. If it's on either through Tiger Transit or for the security shuttle. The security shuttle does run 7 days a week. So you've got transportation, you've got our security staffing. We offer a lot of different training as well. So we offer a campus safety awareness and active shooter response course, our rape aggression defense course, which is offered for an hour of credit every fall and spring semester for female students. We've got an emergency preparedness course as well. We've got a lot of different offerings there to help educate our campus community. over 200 or nearly 200 blue light emergency phones that dial directly into the police station so that they can dispatch an officer immediately. And we partner with you on things like this so that we can understand where we may have other areas where we have gaps that we can fill. We really want to hear from you and continue to improve our safety programs.
Okay, thank you. Would anyone else on the panel like to weigh in on that question? What is your address to students who may currently feel unsafe on campus?
I would like folks to know that Auburn goes above and beyond what is required compliance-wise. So the Title IX regulations require that if there is a sexual assault, that the student who's making the complaint be affiliated, be a student currently at the university. So for us, though, Auburn says, you know what, that's fine, but we also want to hold someone accountable who sexually assaulted somebody, and if that person's affiliated with Auburn University, we don't care that the victim isn't affiliated with the university. We allow victims who live in the community who may be sexually assaulted by somebody who is affiliated with the university to file a formal complaint. We expanded the scope just beyond what the Title IX regulations require. Another example, Title IX does not apply to study abroad, but we don't want our students studying abroad and being sexually assaulted by another student here, and the university not be able to hold that student accountable. So again, we have our policy that expands that scope. Also, the regulations don't require that if a sexual assault occurs off campus or not where the university is not involved, so in an off-campus apartment, normally under the regulations, the university does not have to do anything in that case. We expanded the scope, and in our policy, we can hold somebody accountable for sexually assaulting somebody in an off-campus apartment. The other thing is, we require all employees to be mandatory reporters. So if they learn of a sexual assault, they must report that to our office. That, again, is not required under the regulations. But we want to make sure we're trying to reduce the number of gaps as much as possible in order to create a safe environment for our whole university community.
And to follow up on Catherine's point, I want to reinforce the fact that, if you're a student, faculty, staff, you have access to all the resources on campus. And even if you're not sure about what happened, if you want to just come and talk through, if you're not feeling safe for any particular reason, you can call the Safe Harbor line, and I promise you, you're not going to leave feeling that you were dismissed or ridiculed. We'll hear you out. If you're not feeling safe, we're going to try to figure out what we can do to help you feel safer. And we work with everybody up here on this panel. It's a great teamwork that we have with each other. We understand that students face a lot of challenging situations, and you will be met with really sympathetic ears. So even if you're not sure what happened, but you don't feel right about it, please reach out and encourage your friends to reach out. More importantly, make sure that they know that it truly is a safe harbor. It's a safe place, and we can help try to figure out what are the best ways. Like, I've worked with campus security and APD in, monitoring cameras, getting like a different parking location because somebody felt uncomfortable with somebody, who knew where they parked. And we all want to help each individual student. So don't be embarrassed, don't be afraid. Please just come, because you have so many welcoming ears who just want to help you feel safe and secure and that's not a one size fits all, and that's going to be something that, you know, we can work with you individually on. And I don't know, Bridget, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'll keep this short. I know we're getting a little long-winded here, but I also
No, I'm not.
I also want to emphasize like prevention work, right? We've talked a lot about response. So what happens when someone gets sexually assaulted? In front of that, let's talk about prevention. So on our campus, we have Green Dot, which is our bystander intervention program that our office runs. And that program talks to audiences about being an active bystander and what that looks like. And that can be hard, right? Because nobody leaves their house planning to be a bystander. But sometimes you witness things that look sketchy, you don't feel right about it. So the whole point of that training is to shift the culture on our campus, in our community of Auburn, so that we're all kind of like looking out for each other when we're going out. If you guys think about it, like 2 out of the 3 timely warnings had bystanders present. So think about that. If we can implement that training and like really augment that focus, I think that will really shift the culture and kind of prevent these instances from happening.
That was amazing. That's everything that I wanted to say that Catherine said, Judith and Bridget said everything that I wanted to say. I think a lot of this is opening up for discussion and letting people know that we're here and that you can tell us if you feel unsafe. I think that I know the topic today is of sexual assault, but I gather or assume that there are some people that may feel unsafe for other reasons too. We're here for you to talk to. For the last year or so, myself and Chief Anderson, as well as the other Assistant Chief, Mike Harris, we've put ourselves out there and told people that we want to know your concerns. We do. There's with certain groups, student groups, any type of group, community groups, we're here. We want to hear what's going on. Just don't assume that we know things are going on and we're not doing anything about it. We have to know about certain things. Why are you feeling unsafe? What is it? Is it a certain area? Is it a certain time? Is it a certain person? Is it a certain incident? Let us know so that we can either help you ourselves or direct you to the right resources that can.
Okay, can I just say one more thing? Because when you say there are other things, just so you all know, and kind of going off of what Bridget was talking about, being, you know, aware of what's going on around you and helping, being a good bystander. I gave you the number of sexual assault reports we had received, which was 64. We've received the exact same number of relationship violence reports. That's a very important issue going on college campuses, including Auburn University. So I guess I would also encourage you all to look at your friends, and if you feel like they're in an unhealthy relationship, don't hesitate to have a conversation with them, because sometimes, at least in our work, the unhealthy relationships, the relationship violence cases are really, really difficult because they do have an added danger to them because of the violence, because the person is in a relationship, and not only the danger, but also because the person feels they may be in love with the person and they don't want to leave them. So it's just a very complicated situation, and it's really tough to see those relationships, those unhealthy relationships in young people. So that's another area that we can do work on prevention, or at least, I guess, assistance with too. So I wanted to let you know that.
Okay, so this is a bit of a follow-up question that members of our panel from counseling and the support services might feel more equipped to answer. But how else does the university go about prioritizing the needs of survivors? And can anyone please give us a working definition of what it means to be trauma-informed?
Okay, so as far as prioritizing the needs of survivors, I'm going to talk about Safe Harbor a little bit. So Safe Harbor is our survivor advocacy program, and we are 24 hours. So Judith and I are actively in the office during regular business hours, and then after business hours, even if it's 2 in the morning on a Saturday, we have an after-hours answering service with licensed counselors, so people who have training in trauma, in like emotional distress, in crisis, who can work with you. And then immediately after that phone call is complete, we get sent a report about it. So we're very good about following up the next day. And Safe Harbor is designed to be a crisis program. That means you can walk in at any time, email us at any time, and we'll get back to you immediately if it's during the business day or the very next morning. So it's designed to support the needs of the survivor right then and there. I'm going to transition over to Jolene to talk a little bit about what trauma-informed means. And I think student counseling is a great resource that has lots of trauma-informed clinicians.
Thank you, Bridget. Yes, and I also wanted to start out by just talking a little bit about student counseling services, because we have a very similar model to Safe Harbor. Of course, our services are more broad as it comes to mental health services in general. We do operate Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 in-person services, but also we do have 24-hour counselors available too. So if there's ever an urgent need outside of those business hours, you can certainly give us a call. And in terms of trauma-informed care, when I think of that, that's something that's very important to us at student counseling. And we have lots of clinicians who have a lot of experience working with trauma, who have training in working with trauma, and that's something we're attentive to as a center as a whole. So for example, we're frequently asking people when they come in about traumatic experiences, thinking about how they might be affecting the person now, being aware of, how trauma might manifest for students in terms of the symptoms, in terms of the effect of their mental health and functioning. And also the experience we definitely don't want students to have is to feel like they've been re-traumatized by talking to us. So we want to be sensitive to the needs of the survivors and also finding ways to provide support and connect with a lot of the resources that were mentioned thus far.
Okay, so we are quickly winding down to our audience Q&A portion. So just a few questions left for our panelists.
We're gonna jump.
We're gonna hop over? Okay, all right, no
Yes.
problem.
So sorry, y'all. We're gonna go ahead and jump into the open forum style questions. So if you have a question you'd like to ask, there's a microphone right there, just like a normal city hall. Y'all can line up to ask your questions, and our panelists will get to this.
Hello? There we go. All right. Hi. So what is the university doing to protect the identity of survivors? And what amount do they have to disclose about themselves? If they do, how are you going to protect them?
So the federal law that I talked about, the Clery Act, requires us to protect the confidentiality of survivors to the extent possible, and we're very careful about that. So when we receive a report from any source, if it's from the police especially, it's going to have a name on it because it is a police report. The only place we share that with is the Title IX office so that they can follow up with that survivor. And then the Title IX office has the decision, it makes the decision about whether or not that name will be shared with anybody else for any reason, such as providing accommodations. But even if they're doing that, they're not going to tell anybody what happened to that survivor. They're just going to work with the office that is providing the accommodations to make those necessary, take those necessary measures. So we're very conscious of that, and we do everything we can. We protect it in any kind of publicly available record keeping. We would redact names in any kind of a public information request. We do not include specifics on the crime log. So that's a very important issue for us.
Right. We won't release the name of if we get a report in, we reach out to the victim identified in that report, and if they don't contact us, we just have the case open and until they may in the future contact us. And if they do contact us, we'll have a conversation with them, and if they want to move forward, with a formal process or informal process. I mean, at that point, we will have to share the name with the other person, but we don't do that unless the complainant wants us to.
I would also just add that when we receive reports from our campus security authorities, so those 1,500 people I mentioned at the beginning that have to report crimes to campus safety, we specifically tell them that we do not need names, because for our reporting purposes, we just need to know what happened, where, and when, so that we can assess it and make sure we properly report it. But we don't have to have names for our purposes, and so that's another measure we take to protect the identity.
And same, just to piggyback from a safe harbor perspective, if you come to our office, it is confidential. If a crime occurred on campus, as has been mentioned many times, we're required to fill out a form, and that there are certain caveats that we explain to students before, or faculty or staff, anybody that we work with. You know, one, if you pose a threat to yourself or others, if there's an allegation of child abuse or elder abuse, and then like the third major caveat is if something happened on campus, we're required to disclose, just as Susan said, what happened, when, where, as generally speaking as we can for their statistics. But, you know, and I'm sure it can be frustrating if we have more information, but if the person reporting the information doesn't want that to be disclosed, it's not disclosed. And we do the bare minimum unless somebody wants to take that step forward, which can be frustrating, you know, to somebody else who wants more actionable things that they can do to assist in a situation. But if the survivor, if whoever we're talking to doesn't want to disclose that, we don't. And that's, you know, kind of where things can come to a standstill, and that can be where there's a disconnect between what's being reported in these timely warnings, where they're given just enough to know that something happened, but, you know, unless the survivor wants to take further action, unless they want that information to come out, it doesn't go anywhere. And that is our number one responsibility, and I think with counseling as well, unless there's like an urgency, we do the bare minimum that we can to report to Clary, but we can't overrule, we don't want to overrule any survivor's wishes on that type of issue.
And I just wanted to add, from the student counseling perspective, we are a legally confidential service, and we're actually not a campus security advisor either, so we do not have to report that information.
Thank you.
And I do want to thank everyone for coming out today. I have to leave because I teach class this evening, so I promise I'm not running out on our panelists and audience members. So I do appreciate your answers and informing our community at large today. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I had a question about Green Dot specifically and just kind of the prevention aspect that's happening. And this is just from my experience. I've been through multiple Green Dot training sessions. From my experience, it seems very, like you said, it's very bystander intervention focused and doesn't seem to address always like the power imbalance that's happening or the culture of oppression that happens when these unfortunate situations take place. And from understanding, I could be totally wrong, is that when you give a Green Dot presentation, because it's like a national thing, like Green Dot's at different universities, right?
Correct.
You have to like sign the curriculum that says this is the information I'll present, and there's not a lot of room to tailor the presentation for like specific student audiences. So the same Green Dot presentation that's being given to Panhellenic women is the same that would be given to like BSU students, for example. And so when you're going through that presentation and saying that XYZ resources are available in your report, not taking in consideration that, for example, minority students might not feel as comfortable going to the police as some other students. So just maybe addressing if there's any room that you guys see from your perspective in having a more comprehensive prevention program, if that'll made sense.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm really glad that you asked it. So I will say there's nothing that says Green Dot cannot be tailored. In fact, they actually encourage that we tailor it. And so we typically do consider our audience. I will say that from year to year, it's the same people requesting the Green Dot trainings, which is okay. Like, I would love to spread it farther and wider, and I'm hoping that this whole movement will lead to that. But Green Dot, as like a national entity, actually really encourages us to tailor it to our students, considering cultural stuff, considering who our audience is. So I'm not sure where the no tailoring information is coming from, but I would say as a facilitator that that's not the case. You said something else really good that I wanted to touch on. Like people may not feel comfortable acting as a bystander due to like cultural implications, which I totally get. And I think that's one of the great things about Green Dot is that it provides you with strategies to work around what Green Dot would call barriers. So, like if your barrier is like a cultural identity of yours, there are other ways to like work around that. And Green Dot really encourages us to talk about that and face like, okay, what's getting in the way of me intervening as a bystander? And a lot of times it is, oppressive systems. And like, I think Green Dot's more focused of like acting in the moment. So Green Dot's message isn't like policy and dynamic power changes. It's more so like, okay, how can we work within these systems in this moment to get this person safe? So does that answer your question?
Almost, just also the part about how it's like specifically bystander intervention, not kind of addressing like the root problem, which I know is a very heavy question.
Yeah,
but
so
just- yeah.
according to the research, bystander intervention training programs are a type of violence prevention. So the approach that we take at Auburn is bystander intervention. So that's a specific program, a specific mechanism that has proven to work in reducing like sexual assaults, for example, on college campuses. So that type of program and the way it's designed has been shown to work, and that's the program that we're rolling with. So if you guys have other suggestions or would like to see us implement something else in addition to Green Dot, instead of Green Dot, we're definitely here for it, but the bystander intervention program is the avenue that like we're taking right now.
And just to follow up on that, because the vast majority of us are not perpetrators and we're not victims, we're good people who are just around, and that's how we can maximize like our overall utility, because the majority of us are great people. So if we can just use that force for good, it's harder to identify who's a bad guy, who's a good guy, but it just empowers everybody. So even when things seem a little overwhelming, and I completely understand the sentiment, and I'm really grateful that we're talking about these things. And to me, it's exciting and empowering that like we can all do something. We can all be a part of the change. And it doesn't have to be, you have to fight every fight. Every little Green Dot can go a long way, and it slowly changes the culture. Do you want? Yeah.
So that's also kind of why I'm up here as a panelist, as president of It's On Us. So we're a really new organization. I think this is our third academic year on campus. So I'm going to give just like a brief explanation of what that is. It's On Us is the campus chapter for the National Sexual Assault Prevention Campaign, It's On Us. And we really focus on, bystander prevention, bystander training, domestic violence, intimate partner violence, really everything that we've talked about here today. There's also supplemental training that you can do either through our chapter, or you go on the website, itsonus.org. You can do supplemental training there. And, it's really a self-explanatory title. It's on us as people, as bystanders, oftentimes, not necessarily perpetrator or victim, but, what Judith, my advisor, was saying, it's on us to engage and to be aware of what's happening and to also have the training to be able to do that. So not only is Green Dot training available, but also It's On Us as an on-campus resource.
That's all I have. Thank you.
I'm going to put all of you in the hot seat. You probably heard about in the news about the Florida girl that was vacationing out west, and the relationship started to go bad. Someone reported that he was slapping her around to the police. The police showed up. They apparently weren't too well informed about what had happened, and so they actually gave her the impression that she could be arrested. And the police video of the encounter He's being very cool, smooth talking. She's very distraught, blaming herself. I'd like to ask each of you very briefly, if you were there, if you had seen what happened, if you could sense that it was getting so bad she could be dead, which is what happened, and you had maybe a couple of minutes to talk with her, what would you say? You're a stranger, she doesn't realize she's got a problem, she's very distraught. What would you say to turn her around quickly? Anybody? This is a real tough. I was in a similar situation, and unfortunately the guy broke off the relationship, but I was telling her, get out, get out, get out.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that one from watching, I guess, social media. That's something that I guess is my wife's hobby. She likes to sit there, and that's how she relaxes. And so I didn't know anything about that case, and probably until maybe last week, and she was telling me about it, and then I started following it along with millions of other people. And I wouldn't sit here. I don't want to sit here Monday morning quarterback any other organization or anything like that. But I think all incidents like that are different, and it depends on your training and your ability. I know that and how we handle domestic violence issues here, typically, if there's signs of domestic violence, an arrest is usually made. About 99% of the time, an arrest is going to be made because of our state law. I don't know their law there. I know that here, if there's a domestic violence incident, and that if we can prove that there was a domestic violence, that something happened, that an arrest would be made.
Okay, I might add one factor was that the police apparently weren't told that the report to 911 says he was slapping her around. So when he said, oh, she attacked me and scratched me and looked at my face and everything, the police took him at his word and threatened to arrest her for attacking him. So that was a factor. I might add one thing that a friend of mine did when he was a taxi cab driver. He would sometimes pick up prostitutes who were being abused, and he would offer to say, I'll take you to the bus station, give him the bus fare to go home, and someone would pick him up on it. So one of the things you can do in those situations is whatever's standing in the way. In her case, she's 1,500 miles from home. She's totally dependent on him and everything. You could just say, I'll pay your airfare back home or something. But, I've wrestled with it. And apparently a park ranger tried to persuade her, but what do you do when you've got a couple of minutes and a woman is in shock? And so, anyway.
Yes, sir, I understand. That is a difficult situation. It goes back to what Catherine was talking about, how it's important for us to recognize signs of abuse in relationships. It goes back, it just reiterates what she was saying. It really does. And it goes back to that bystander type situation too. I know that years ago, the domestic violence laws were different until we had a couple of several significant national headline cases that were about domestic violence and ended up being murder. And I think that kind of sparked a lot of change in how we viewed it and how people would intercede. It used to be domestic violence was one of those personal things where you could hear your neighbors involved in an altercation. And now people know better. We know to intercede. They know that they can call us now and say, look, I want to be anonymous, but I think something's going on. Don't come to my house, or I don't want to be involved, but I think something's happening. And I think that's something positive that has happened through all of that horror and death that we've seen as a country, that we have changed because of this. And let's not let this get to that point here. There's a sign back there that says, hey, you paved the way. I think we can do it.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think it's a good question. I think it's something we all need to recognize. And I think an important thing that we see with Safe Harbor, give people resources, but meet them where they are. Let them know what's available, but they have to come to that decision on their own, and you can't make somebody do something that they don't want, so you just support as you can and let them know. But it's a good question.
And I would
Thank you.
also say, friends can talk to your friends when you see that they're in a relationship that you feel is unhealthy. And if you see signs of abuse or if you're concerned, you can submit a report to us, or you can pick up the phone and call us and say, this is what I'm observing. And we will then send those resources to that individual and let them know that we are here. It will include the community, domestic violence, the organization, and it'll include Safe Harbor. So if they may not contact us, but you can on their behalf.
Thank you.
I just had two questions. Sorry. Earlier you mentioned the security shuttles as a way to safely get back home after dark. And I wanted to say, I've had multiple instances where I've called a security shuttle and it just hasn't showed up. Or when it has shown up, it's been 30 minutes late. And more often than not, I end up just walking home alone at night. And I'm wondering if there's going to be any changes to that system.
We definitely don't want to hear that. We pride ourselves in providing a timely service there and a very important service. And whenever you have a situation like that, I encourage you to call our main number, which is 844-8888. You'll get we've got 2 people in there answering the phone at night, and we've got the security shuttle line and another line, so you can get somebody else to make sure that your request got through. You can also put a request in through the Auburn Safety app. And if you ever have a problem with the security shuttle, please notify us immediately. You can put a submit a tip in through the app. That is not monitored 24 hours a day, but it is checked pretty regularly every couple of hours. And so we'll see that relatively quickly and can follow up. We can listen to voice recordings of the calls. We can investigate to find out what happened and why you had that service issue.
All right. I also just wanted to ask for clarification. Earlier it was said that there was 64 reports of sexual assault, but it was only mentioned that 2 of them resulted in action against the perpetrator. And I'm wondering why that is.
Right. So I went through all the numbers, and that's because the victims in those cases wanted to move forward. None of the other victims requested to move forward.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
It was mentioned fairly early in the presentation about informal resolutions. So is there a policy for someone who has been found to commit misconduct? Does anything go on their record as far as the university is concerned, or as far as job applications concerned, or is that purely the discretion of the victim?
If you use an informal resolution, normally there is not anything on a disciplinary record. That could be a term in the disciplinary record, in the informal resolution, to say that the victim could say, I want the accused to agree that this goes on their disciplinary record. They could put that in there. But normally the incentive to go the informal route is so that something isn't on the person's disciplinary record. That's why the victim doesn't want to prolong the process, or they don't want to see the person leave the university or whatever. They just want this person not to be able to do whatever, or get help. And so it would not end up on their disciplinary record. And if you go through the formal process and there's a hearing, yes, it will end up on the disciplinary record.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Morgan. I'm a senior in industrial design here at Auburn University. My question is to Dr. Stewart. You mentioned the involvement of the district attorney's office in Lee County as a mechanism of accountability when reporting. Less than a year ago, our district attorney was arrested and charged and convicted on felony charges that had to do with his own sexual misconduct. And in that, I'm just going to read a little bit of that report. It says, the opening trial statements, Assistant Alabama Attorney General Jasper Roberts, the accused, brought a party-type atmosphere to his office, while a former deputy prosecutor testified the office resembled a fraternity house. That isn't to say that this only occurs at fraternity houses. The perjury charge that he was convicted on stems from proceedings before the Alabama Ethics Commission when Commissioner John Plump questioned Hughes about a discrimination complaint filed with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission by a former assistant district attorney. In the complaint, attorney, I won't name her, alleged Hughes created a sexually inappropriate work environment from the day she was hired in October 2017. I'm going to skip through a bit of this, but the victim was approached by the chief assistant district attorney at the time, Jessica Ventier, who is now our district attorney. And Jessica insinuated something sexual happened that night, and then fabricated a story, according to the victim, that the victim threatened a custodian in the building who saw the two of them together that night. This goes on to say that the victim came forward in a statement and said that Ventier was aware of Hughes' wrongful behavior and chose to take actions to silence me. How should Auburn residents feel safe or comfortable reporting to the police or Lee County or the district attorney when the sitting district attorney is stated as being complicit in silencing victims coming forward?
Great question, really good question, really good question. I think that goes to a lot of forethought and foresight that the founding fathers, per se, had when they designed the criminal justice system. Therefore, any felony case, which all of these would be felony cases, I think they built this mechanism there called the grand jury so that charges could not be trumped against a citizen by the government, specifically different types of citizens, especially ones that we consider protected groups now, which I think is very important to remember. So during the grand jury process, what happens is pretty much similar to what we're doing here. The district attorney typically is in the room. However, the grand jury is composed of citizens of the community. The cases are presented from factual basis from the case file by the investigator or the person that investigated the case. The decisions made to prosecute, to true bill or no bill the case are decided upon by that group of people, not by that individual. And I think that's something that is really important to know about that too, is that those decisions weren't made by him or her or anyone else. It was made by that group inside that room. And that's something we can hang our hat on, and thank goodness that that's something that someone thought about years and years ago before anything like this ever occurred, to prevent things like that from happening. And I think it's more importantly to say, it's not to show, to say that other people, to prove or disprove something happened, but it's really to protect people from the government for putting charges on people that were unnecessary.
Okay, thank you. The prosecutor, however, is involved in sentencing, correct? And in the request for sentencing, and corresponds with the plaintiff on the extent of that sentencing, and then follows up once they are incarcerated, if they are convicted, on whether or not they can be released.
You're absolutely right, but also part of that sentencing process is based upon the person's background, their previous history, and also the judge oversees all that. So it's not solely based on what a prosecutor says. It's also, which is more important, it brings up victim statements or witness statements that are used in court too. A lot of that has to play in the sentencing process too. And Vocal is another group, that's another resource that we have as well too, that help people during that process.
Yeah, to be clear, I would not endorse Vocal or Jessica Ventier's approach to sentencing, because they often go against the victim's wishes to reduce sentencing or to release people, but that's not why we're here. The follow-up to that would be what the gentleman before me asked about the informal resolution and the process for that, because to me, your description of it sounds a lot like taking a restorative justice approach instead of a punitive one. And you cite that many of the people that come to you don't want to discipline and don't want to punish, but they want healing or harm reduction and justice first and foremost. So is there any initiative between Title IX and all of the people providing restorative justice approaches and the police department or the district attorney in using any of those, or is there a stark difference in who you go to and what response you get?
The question with that, as far as a stark difference, yes, there is a stark difference as far as the services that you receive. That is, more informal. We don't typically, some of the cases that she says that they investigated, we don't know. I think one of the other questions about earlier was about how do they protect the victim's information. And they go to great lengths to do that, great lengths. And I think that's one of the reasons why the numbers are different too, as far as the cases that they investigate versus the ones that we investigate too. I talked with someone earlier today about these different programs and everything that we're doing here. Apparently, you know, that we can come up with all kinds of programs in the world. We can. But it goes back to that question that young lady said, talked about the green dot. What are we going to do to address the underlying problem? I think that's what these questions, and I hope the rest of them are about. What are we going to do to address the underlying problem? Not what's happened. I mean, because we've been reactive enough, right? We've been reactive enough. Let's do something to address the underlying problem. What can we do? Now, everyone wants to sit here and talk about what the police is doing, the university is doing, all this and everything else. Let's think about what we can do. I mean, this isn't an Auburn problem. This is an Alabama problem. This is a problem that's been going on for a while. I just read an article this morning where there was another university where they had a group of people that protested the night before for 2 nights outside of a residence. So this is something that we all need to think about. What can we do? I mean, because the thing about it is, let's do something before it does hit you at home. Let's do something before it is something that something major does happen. And we look at this and, oh, it happened in Auburn. You know, that's why I said before, I'm glad everyone came out today. I'm glad everyone's here. I wish there were more. I do. This is a good point for us to sit down and have a conversation. And that's all that I've wanted since, all I've wanted and all that Chief Anderson's wanted, all that we've ever wanted since the beginning, is to be able to sit down with a group of people and come up with something. What can we do other than the means that we have right now? This is what we have. What else can we do? Let's look at each other and say, what can we do? The bystander program, I mean, doggone it. If you see somebody in some trouble, step in and do something. Don't wait for someone else to do it. Well, they might get upset. Yes, maybe they will. But think about what you can do to intervene. Tomorrow, what are you going to be thinking about? 3 years from now, 4 years from now, when you're no longer a student here at Auburn, what are you going to be thinking about? This doesn't just apply here at the university. It applies everywhere.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Elena. I'm in my 2nd year here at Auburn. I'm going to be speaking about Greek life because we've seen a lot of focus on that recently, but I do want to acknowledge that only like 35% of Auburn students are in Greek life. So I know that this issue applies to other people on Auburn's campus, but people in Greek life are at an elevated risk of sexual violence. So I know that a lot of people have been calling for more education about sexual assault for members of Greek life. I am a member of Greek Life, so I'm aware that most organizations on campus already require an in-person training their first year of membership and annual trainings to adhere to national membership guidelines. But I feel these aren't adequate because the annual trainings are typically administered in online modules that I myself have ignored and opened other tabs or scrolled through social media while watching in order to get them done. And I was wondering if your offices can make those trainings mandatory for the vulnerable populations in Greek life, sororities and fraternities alike.
Hi, so we're actually working on stripping down and completely revamping the Greek engagement program that It's On Us currently has. I completely agree with you. You know, a lot of times Greek organizations see these trainings as a check mark. And, you know, I was also in a Greek organization. I was the same as you. You know, they're online programs. They're not engaging. They're not conversations. And so It's On Us is really working to make it more of a conversation, make it in person. We're working on materials right now to go around to different Greek organizations in order to do that. So that's a problem that I definitely have seen in my years here at Auburn. And that's one of my top priorities as president of It's On Us, is to actually make the conversation mandatory and make it engaging and collaborative with, you know, not just Greek organizations, but everyone on campus. But that's definitely a problem that I've seen specific to Greek organizations.
So I was just going to say that we are going a little bit over. We're going to take the last couple of questions here because we want to go ahead and get to those questions. But we recognize we're going a little bit over, but we'll stick with you.
Okay, I just had one more. It's quick. I do feel that additionally to the lack of education, that there's a culture of silence in Greek life that is perpetuated by sorority and fraternity members striving to keep their group within the good graces of both the university and other Greek chapters, and that fear of university, peer, or community retaliation leads to underreporting as chapters try to keep incidents quiet. How are your offices going to work to let victims know that they won't be the cause of that kind of retaliation and backlash from the Greek community as a whole? Because I think we've seen, in other states, I've seen it before, that if victims do report and like a chapter ends up getting shut down or someone gets kicked out, that they end up with a lot of backlash. Because someone knows who they are. Like, even if your offices aren't releasing their names, someone knows who they are, and that news does spread fast.
I know it's hard to say, well, there is actually a violation that's called retaliation that's in the policy that's specifically there for people who come forward or people who participate in the process. Witnesses, may not want to because of the backlash, like you said. And what I was going to say was it's easy to say, don't worry, we have this, policy that says you can't retaliate. It's not necessarily going to stop the retaliation, but if we learn about it, we can hold people accountable for that. We can try, but I know, really, it comes down to people just being decent people, and if someone's going to come forward with a complaint, let them come forward and treat people respectfully. And if witnesses are going to come forward, treat them respectfully. If an organization ends up shut down, that's the way it goes. But you don't take it out on that person who was coming forward because something happened to them and re-victimize them. But we can move forward with a retaliation violation if that is something that occurs.
And also, if someone comes in and wants to report and we're facilitating that process, we can't guarantee hey, your sorority is not going to hold this against you. We're not in the inner workings of the Greek system. So I think that it sounds like there's definitely room for improvement in that area, but that's its own kind of system, right? So I don't know, I think you should keep talking about it within the Greek system. I think that's where the change is going to happen there.
Thank you.
So I have a question for Chief Stewart. So over the past decade and a half, there have been several high-profile studies on the percentage of sexual assault cases involving college students that go unreported, something that the panel touched on tonight. The lowest estimate of what percentage of these cases go unreported was 72% from the American Association of Universities in 2015. One of the most common reasons that victims listed for not reporting in this study was that they felt nothing would be done about their assault. Now we know that in the US, hundreds of thousands of rape kits sit in labs and police departments untested every year. And there are no laws in Alabama that mandate that victims have a right to have their rape kit tested, or even that they have a right to know about the status of their rape kit. So my question for you is that, can you give any assurance to the victims of sex crimes that if they report an assault and they have a test done, that their rape kit will not only be tested, but that it will be tested quickly and that they will be able to know the status? And my second quick follow-up question is that in addition to this, would it be possible for the Auburn Police Department to publish the number of untested rape kits that sit in their precinct?
The number of untested rape kits at a precinct would be 0, but that's a question of semantics. I think that there are sexual assault kits that we don't house them there. They are housed at the hospital because we do have Jane Doe kits that people will go in and report things to the hospital. without us knowing, we can't submit a sexual assault kit unless we have a report. And that's what it goes to that, is that we can't, if someone comes in and does a sexual assault kit at the hospital, we're not notified to come up there and pick it up unless we have a report that goes with it. And that goes back to the thing that all of us were talking about. We need reports to do this. We can't just go up there and they won't give them to us because of HIPAA and because of confidentiality. We can't go get those kits. We can't submit them. And is it a problem? No. Yes, it is. It's a problem with how the people view this whole topic and the different variables that come along with reporting sexual assault. That's what it comes down to.
And I just want to tack on to that. So after a forensic exam is done, the survivor has 90 days to decide if they want to move forward with legal proceedings. So the number of untested kits, I'm sure, is high because a lot of them are still within that 90-day window of them making a decision. And there was something else. But yeah, that's like mostly what I wanted to say, is that you have to get the forensic exam done within 72 hours of penetration. And then you have another 90 days to kind of like cool off, get more information, and decide what you want to do next. And I think that's great for survivors. And I think there's a lot of really good reasons that they don't want to report. And I think there's a lot of really good reasons why they do want to report. So that 90-day window just gives them some time to become more informed.
Thank you.
Hi, so I actually have two questions. One of them was touched on a little bit by the girl who went before me. On the topic of retaliation and retribution, this is for both the university side and the law enforcement side, what specific, if any, protections might be in place to prevent a victim from being harassed or intimidated by the perpetrator or the perpetrator's friends and acquaintances if they do go along and file a report and they're waiting for the report proceedings to be handled, instead of just waiting for retribution to happen and then reporting after the fact?
Sure. At any time, a victim can ask for a no-contact directive, and we will issue that. It's a mutual no-contact directive to both parties, but it would prohibit any form of communication, includes social media, and it also includes indirect contact. So friends can't communicate to the victim on the person's behalf. We can also, we customize those, so it could include other individuals. We can send those no contact directives to multiple people.
Yes, and it's illegal to interfere or contact a witness or victim, harass them if they're part of an investigation on an ongoing criminal case. So you still have options as far as protection from abuse orders, court orders, and everything of that nature too.
All right, and then my second question was about the Title IX informal resolutions. So it is from what I understand, it's a mutual agreement wherein the victim outlines what they would like to see out of the arrangement, and then the perpetrator has to agree to that. What would happen if the perpetrator did not agree to the victim's terms? Would the victim have to take a lesser agreement that they're not as comfortable with, or would it just be thrown out completely and have to start over?
Well, it would depend upon the egregiousness of the violation, but it could result that we open the investigation and move forward. That would be one scenario. The other scenario is I have to say, we've really not had respondents not adhere to the agreement. If they don't, we could hold them accountable through the student code of conduct and for failure to comply with an official agreement. Because the Title IX coordinator signs that agreement also. It's not just the two parties. And so the university is agreeing to that, is also a party to that agreement. So we can hold them accountable for failing to comply. We put registration holds if they haven't completed something, if they have community service that they agreed to do. Hold them accountable, put a hold on their registration, hold them accountable through student code of conduct, or open up the investigation again.
Thank you.
Hi, I don't necessarily have a specific question, but I did want to, tell you a couple of comments because I know we've talked a lot about what the university is currently doing and what the police department is currently doing to keep us safe on campus, but we haven't talked a lot about the concerns that students have raised about the university not doing enough and how the university can do better. So, that being said, just so that we're all on the same page, we're all working with the same set of facts. In the US, 13% of all undergraduate students experience some form of sexual violence before they graduate. That's 26% of female students and 7% of male students. That's 1 in 4 women and 1 in 20 men on any given campus. That means in all likelihood, everybody in this room knows at least one person who either has experienced sexual violence or will experience sexual violence at Auburn. And I know that these are national statistics and that we like to say that they don't apply to us, but it would be the height of hubris, especially after the string of assaults that we've seen in the past couple of weeks, to think that we're somehow better than these national averages. So we're not an exception. I do know that Auburn prides itself on its low crime rate, and part of that is because we have a very dedicated law enforcement branch, as we've discussed thoroughly tonight, and because we have lots of social equity programs here on campus. I always feel very safe leaving my bag full of expensive electronics laying around on campus when I'm standing in line for food for 45 minutes. But the reality is, as a woman on a college campus, I am twice as likely to be raped at school than robbed. So the question is, why can we prevent every other kind of crime except for sexual violence on campus? Well, one reason crime is so low here is because we all live and work so close to one another, it's almost impossible not to keep each other accountable. There are always hundreds of eyewitnesses around on campus. Like, it's a small place, there's a lot of us here, but for some reason, that logic doesn't apply to sexual violence. And maybe it's because it's the one crime we don't want to hold each other accountable for. So I don't think it's been raised enough in this meeting that there is a culture on this campus and on college campuses across the country that encourages abuses of power, not just in the form of sexual violence, but across the board. We'll call it rape culture because that's a term that's been used for decades now. But it's not just about rape. It's just the idea that if you have some kind of power or some kind of status above anybody else, it is not just normal to use it to harass or to embarrass or to assault those below you, but it's your right. And this ideology has been enforced in lots of this campus's institutions, but most of all in its Greek life, especially in its fraternities. That is why we always see this coming back to people asking the university to do more to prevent the abundance of sexual violence that happens in frat houses or at frat events. So we know that rape is not about sexual desire, that it's about power, and it falls into that culture of thinking that it is your right to impose your will on someone else because you fall into some higher group. Almost every fraternal ritual is based in some imbalance of power. It is normalized that sexual violence will take place at frat houses. The rapiest frats on campus are passed down, that information is passed down from class to class in this word of mouth orientation that is just as important to our safety as Camp War Eagle. The university is more than aware of the reputations of the fraternities that it hosts on its campus, but it accepts this violence as a fact of life, as an acceptable price for having fraternities here on campus. And because it is unwilling to confront or combat rape culture in Greek life, Auburn University has followed in the tradition of placing the burden on women to prevent their own assaults. We've talked a lot tonight about all the things that women can do on campus to make sure that they are not victims. And it's a burden that we've carried for a really long time. And we've done it extensively. There is not a second of any day that you could ask any woman in this room that she is not thinking somewhere in the back of her head about what she's going to do if the guy behind her is trying to gain on her and not just running late for class. Or, you know, who can I trust to hold my drink at this party while I go to the bathroom? Can I trust anyone around me to help me if I get into a situation that I don't think I can get out of by myself? We are doing everything we can to protect ourselves, but the university doesn't seem to want to help us. Because I know we've talked about it a lot tonight, it is important that you name the institutions that are encouraging this culture of sexual violence on campus. We need to know where we are safe to go and where we aren't. Because without that knowledge, we cannot make informed decisions about our bodies and about our health. And I know that you will say that it's important to protect the identities of survivors. I agree 100%. I don't think that also means that you have to protect the institutions that create more survivors. Letting us know where the danger is the very least Auburn can do to help women protect themselves on campus. And announcing the names of frats connected to sexual violence could also encourage brothers to police each other for fear of organization-wide punishment. It is disheartening that I have to come up here and ask for the bare minimum because I really love this university. And I shouldn't have to ask for the bare minimum. You should already be doing so much more. And what that means, what that looks like, is not placing the blame and not placing the burden on women to protect themselves on campus. College women are 50% less likely to report their assaults than non-student women of the same age. And that has a lot to do with the way that we talk about sexual assault prevention on campus. Because when you say, we have all these options here for you to protect yourself, and you got assaulted anyway, like 1 in 4 women do, you're saying it's our fault. And I know at the end of every email where you tell us that there was a sexual assault on campus, they're in big, bold words, rape is never the victim's fault. But your actions speak so much louder. When you are asking potential victims to take more responsibility for their safety from potential perpetrators, you take responsibility out of the hands of the people who want to harm their fellow students. If you want to start sending a different message, then you need to address the root problem, not the potential victims of it. That means preventing men from raping instead of preventing women from living. You can start by mandating that student organizations undergo Green Dot bystander intervention programs, because it's currently not mandated. Then you can expand educational and outreach programs to educate students about healthy relationships and respecting bodily autonomy. These are the first steps in changing the culture of abuse on campus. Auburn should also continue to promote and expand its support programs for survivors with an emphasis on reaching out to male survivors who are even less likely than women to come forward. Finally, of course, Auburn University should have a true no-tolerance policy for sexual violence on campus or at university-sanctioned events. That means believing survivors. That means quickly and effectively punishing perpetrators. That means punishing organizations that encourage and tolerate sexual violence publicly and severely. Right now, Auburn's chronically disappointing response to sexual violence sends the message, if you rape, you'll probably get away with it. Now, I know earlier it was said that we don't release the names of perpetrators because they usually aren't a threat after that. But 2/3 of college rapists assault 4 or more women before the end of college. They make up 90% of assaults on campuses. And most, if they don't get caught and punished in college, go on to rape after they graduate. They become the toxic CEOs who think it's okay to molest their female employees. If we don't stop it now, it becomes a bigger problem later. If you commit to punishing all instances of sexual violence and obtaining justice for all survivors, you can instead tell students, you matter and we will protect you. Auburn University should be a place where everyone feels safe regardless of gender, race, sexual orientation, or creed. It doesn't live up to that vision right now, but it can. But only if you acknowledge that all of your students are valuable and worthy, and not just the overwhelmingly wealthy, white, male students that populate our fraternities. Only if you acknowledge that our safety is more important than marketing or than what the news is going to say or about how your donors will react. If you truly put your students first, Auburn University can be the college it advertises itself as. Thank you.
That was our last question for tonight. For the 2 students that still have questions, if you'll come up to the stage, we'll answer those on here. There was asked at the beginning, where do we get the questions at the very beginning of our process when we asked the panelists the questions. They came through SGA from feedback from our student body, so that's how we got those questions. Also, if you're on Zoom, we will take, if you put your question in the Q&A, we will take a shot of that, save that, and the panelists will respond to that. Also, if you're in the room and your question didn't get answered, there are note cards over on the, as you exit the door, please write it down there and we will respond to those. At the other time, I would say if you got any other questions, Auburn Answers, which is an SGA module that you can put through, we also will get that from SGA and answer those questions tonight. First, I would like to thank the panelists for being here tonight, so thank y'all for that. Secondly, and more importantly, I want to thank the students for coming tonight. This is how we start to make our campus better. You can hear the passion in the questions that we've got. You can hear the passion in the response of what they've asked us to do. The students have asked us to be a better university, and so I just want to thank you all for that tonight. And with that, we have closed our session. Thank you.